Welcome back to Second Take, where we talk about reclaiming your health, taking back your power, and rewriting your story. So, welcome back. I want to talk to you all a little bit about a phrase that you're going to hear me say quite often. When I was in management, the people that worked for me, they used to laugh about how it was kind of the going joke that when I died, on my epitaph was going to be written the phrase, "What are you going to do about it?" Because it was something that I frequently said to those that worked for me. And it goes back to this idea of radical responsibility. And when I was thinking about health and recovering health and what it was that I wanted to share with people here, that idea of radical responsibility, I realized started for me very early on. And it's something that has kind of taken a play throughout my life, and it became a theme. And I think it's one that really enabled me to take that radical responsibility and look at my health in that way. And that's when things really started to change for me. When I stopped thinking that I was going to find a doctor that would have the key, when I stopped thinking that I needed another person somewhere or a medication to help me, and when I realized that it really was up to me to change my own health and take responsibility for the boat that I was in, that's when things started to change. So I wanted to take a moment and kind of go back and explain how that came to be so that you might have a better understanding as to who it is that's talking to you here and why I might be able to understand some of your own struggles and some of the things that you've been through. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my past. Um, there's a I grew up in a normal household, right? Nothing specifically important about me or my family or where I came from. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I wasn't born there. I was born in New York on Long Island. My family all was in Long Island. So my parents were the first of both of their respective families to move off the island, which was kind of a big deal. So my sister and I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, away from any real extended family. So it was just my father, my mother, and my sister and I. She was 3 years younger than me. And growing up, it was pretty much normal childhood. I was raised Catholic, but about the age of 12 or so, I decided I was no longer going back to church. I didn't like it. It always kind of felt weird to me. And I remember thinking back then that it felt cultish. So if that offends anyone, I'm sorry. This is just the thought process of a 12-year-old. But at that time, I remember thinking that it felt like a cult, that everybody knelt down or stood up or recited things at certain periods. And I didn't like that. So I quit going to church. Some would say that what happened after that is probably part and parcel because I quit going to church, but suffice it to say, that's what happened. So that was when I was about 12. When I was in high school, well, first of all, I went to a private school for middle school. And the only reason that's important is that I lost all of my friend group when I was in fifth grade because I came up through third through fifth grade with a certain group of kids. And then I went to a private middle school and they all went on to the public middle school. So I went to a private middle school, had a new friend group there. And then my freshman year of high school decided I was done with the private school and went back to public school. So now I'm reintroduced to that group of kids that I left in fifth grade. And I'm back there with them. And I've been gone for 3 years. So I don't know any of these people anymore. And that reintroduction in high school is a little bit rough, but the private middle school that I'd gone to was scholastically very, very strong. So I was able to come into the public high school in all honors classes. And most of what I did my entire freshman year was a repeat of things I'd already done. So I got really good grades, which was great. I was involved in all sorts of things scholastically and really was having a decent beginning to my high school career. And then things got a little bit interesting. In the summer between freshman and sophomore year, I got in with a group of kids that were doing things we probably shouldn't have back in that day. I graduated in 1991. So yeah, this is the late 80s, early 90s, and I'm out deciding that on the weekends, you'd tell your parents you were going to go watch a movie, and in reality, you were with somebody kind of joyriding. And then we would always go to a pizza place parking lot And invariably somebody had alcohol and we would be drinking beer in this parking lot. And they would put up with us because we really didn't cause a ruckus too much. But nobody called the cops. We'd all just kind of hang out, drink some beer, and then go home. So that started that summer. And my sophomore year, that escalated to me trying marijuana for the first time. So I thought I was really cool. I was hanging out with a cool group of kids, and I thought I was gonna, have some fun. So we skipped school this one particular day and went and smoked a joint, which I'd never done before, had never been around it before. And I remember thinking that was the worst thing in the world and I would never do it again because it was horrible. I felt awful. I remember getting hungry and I remember getting paranoid. And those are the only two things I remember. And I absolutely hated it. I thought, why would anybody ever do this? This is the dumbest thing. So that was my experience. Well, unfortunately, my parents found out about it because the school called my parents and told them that I had skipped school. So we had been having some issues, my parents and I. I was a very strong-willed teenager. And though I was, doing great in school and doing all these things, I was very much bucking my parents' authority and trying to test the limits as far as my parents were concerned. So we had already been in family counseling at that point, and the counselor told my parents that I needed a drug test. Well, obviously, I tested positive for THC. So I remember trying to tell my parents this was the first time I ever did it, and they did not believe me. They thought I was lying. And I ended up later that week sitting in a drug rehab. Yeah, I was sitting in drug rehab. My parents had dropped me off and said, "We love you, and this is for your own good." And off they went. And I was left to deal with this drug rehabilitation program after smoking pot once. And that is the honest to God truth. So, needless to say, that was probably just an amazingly difficult time for me. Obviously, not probably, it was. Um, but for more reasons than one would understand at first blush. Because although, yeah, I'm in this 3-month drug rehab program that I didn't need, the thing that was so catastrophic about this was that I was in school with a bunch of honors kids who, they're in all honors classes and they're all geared up and headed towards good colleges and they've got futures ahead of them. And the last thing they want to be involved with is a kid who was in drug rehab. So I lost my entire friend group. I lost my thought process as to where I was headed. I lost my belief about myself and who I was. I lost everything. To be 15 and be going through that type of a situation was really difficult. And it changed a lot of the trajectory for my teenage years because when I got out of that drug rehab program after the 3 months and I went back to school, of course, there were tons of rumors, everything from she was doing cocaine to somebody said that I had killed someone. I mean, it was rampant. The rumors were unbelievable. And I was ostracized. And the only kids that would really talk to me at that point were the kids who thought it was really cool because they were doing a bunch of drugs themselves. So I went from hanging out with the honors kids, this group of kids who were really scholastically on point, to literally none of them would even talk to me again. And I'm now only able to speak to the kids who are smoking cigarettes all the time and smoking marijuana and probably doing a lot more than that. But yeah, so that's what I was left with. So I kind of became friends with a few of those people and was trying to eke my way through high school. High school's bad enough, right? I don't know too many people that had really excellent memories from high school, but mine were not excellent to say the least. So when I was 17, now I'm a junior, I decided the hell with it. I'm leaving school. I'm done with this. So right after my 17th birthday, I moved out of my parents' house. I left high school and decided I'm not going back. I'm going to go get a job and I'm going to do this another way because this sucks. So off I go and I get a job at one little diner after another working as a waitress. That's what I was doing for a little while. And one of the girls that I lived with, she and I were hanging out a lot, drinking a lot. We were kind of footloose and fancy free. And it was like that for about 3 months. Again, during a summer period. Summers weren't good for me when I was a teenager, I guess. But It was about 3 months that we were kind of doing anything and everything that we felt like doing and barely eking by, living in a crappy little apartment and doing our thing. And then she got pregnant. That was shocking. And I remember thinking then, okay, this is a whole new ball game, and I do not want to be involved with bringing a child into anything near this type of environment. This is just wrong. So that was a wake up call for me. And I remember calling my mother and asking her to help me, to come to get me out of this situation, to help me out. And to her credit, she did, because I hadn't talked to her in 3 months, but she was there. So she came and picked me up. And I remember having a conversation. She said, "We can't let you stay with us. You can't come home. But my cousin, my mom's cousin, is a drug and alcohol counselor, and he's willing to take you in for the year. He lives in Maryland, and you can go live with him for the year, and you can go back to school and start into your senior year. Your grades were strong enough. They're going to let you start as a senior. You're not going to have to repeat your junior year." So I thought, okay, well, that sounds pretty good. At least I can get back on par and I'll graduate on time. I would still graduate in 91. So I did. So off I go to Maryland to go live with these people for a year. Had never met them, had never talked to them before. They pick me up at the airport. Introductions are made. They've got two children. One is 4 years younger than me, a boy who was in his freshman year of high school. And then they had a daughter who was 10. And I show up at the house and I don't know these people from Adam. So they had this just amazingly beautiful property with 30 some odd acres in Maryland. It was beautiful. They lived way out in the country, and it was definitely different than anything I'd ever seen. You know, I grew up in the suburbs of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you had a little tiny property around your house with a little small section of grass, and that was it. And here I'm on 30 some odd acres with orchards and gardens, and it was just beautiful. And I remember laughing as I went to school because there was a tractor parking lot because a lot of the kids would ride their tractors to school because they weren't old enough to have a driver's license yet, but they would drive their tractor to school. So I found the whole thing just really amusing. So long story short, the people that I was living with had their own issues. They had their own issues, they had their own problems. Everybody does, but it was really, really volatile. Um, it was an environment that I was not familiar with a level of volatility that I had never before experienced. And that was hard to see and it was hard to be a part of. And I remember sitting there very early on, looking out the window one night and thinking, this is so stupid. This is stupid. I don't need to be here. I shouldn't be here. I don't want to be here. And as I was sitting there fighting with myself about what I was going to do, the thought came to me very clearly. You know what you want, which is to graduate from high school, and you know you want to go to college, and you know you want to do all these things with your life, but yet the easier road is to quit. The easier road is to walk away and go back to what you were doing or find something else to do and to not go through the pain of living in this situation that you're currently in. And as I sat there and I thought about that, and I just stared out the window looking at the stars that night, I remember thinking, everybody expects me to quit. Because I always had. I had always kind of taken the easy road in a lot of ways. And I remember thinking, I know what I want to do. So what am I going to do about it? Am I going to actually do the hard? Am I going to do what I don't want to do and sit here and eke out an existence for this year, get the grades I need to get and move on with my life? Or am I going to do what people expect, quit, give up, and end up God knows where? I really didn't know where I was going to end up. And it was a struggle. I still have a journal that I kept that year, and it's really interesting to read because there was a definitive struggle going on for me between what I wanted, what I knew I wanted for my future, and what I wanted because it would be the easier thing to do in the now. But ultimately, the what are you going to do about it became I'm going to do the hard. I'm going to do what I need to do to become the person I want to be. So that's what I did. I eked it out. And I didn't miss a day of school that entire school year. I was in school every day because being there at that house was a horrible alternative. So I was at school every day and I got great grades and I was in AP classes for everything and I was going to be off to college and I knew that this was the turning point for me in my life. So that what are you going to do about it? That was kind of the first time I remember thinking that way. And then fast forward, I get out of high school. I had gotten into a college that I wanted to go to and ended up financially, that wasn't really the best of moves for me. So I decided I was going to go to a community college and I wanted to be a nurse. So I was going to go to community college, get my first 2 years out of the way with my basic classes, and then go and get my RN. That was my game plan. And I was working at an old folks' home as a nurse tech to help put myself through school. And I remember meeting someone who ended up becoming the father of my children and my first husband. And when that relationship started, man, I was young. was I was only I had just turned 19 when we met, and we it was a typical relationship, typical young relationship. And I say typical only in that we really didn't understand each other very well. We had, kind of that quick fling going on, and probably would have ended there, except I got pregnant. So I got pregnant with my daughter, and we decided we were going to get married, which we did. So I was 4 months pregnant when we got married. And I thought this was the beginning of everything. This was the beginning of my life. And it was in a lot of ways. My daughter, the birth of my daughter, and that was the beginning of so many things for me. It changed my life and it made me the person that I am today. I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't gotten pregnant with her. So everything happens for a reason. But when I got pregnant and we got married, I anticipated this was going to be the beginning of all good things. We were going to work together. I was going to get my RN. He was going to get his degree. We were going to become this power couple that did all the things. And in reality, what happened was I then became eventually a 24-year-old with 2 kids and was divorced. I had my son 3.5 years after my daughter. And shortly after the birth of my son, my ex-husband decided he did not want to be a husband and father anymore. And I remember when he left, I was now, like I said, 24 years old with 2 children under 5. I did not have a job at that time. I was a stay-at-home mom and I was going to school. And I remember thinking at that moment, what the hell am I going to do now? And I was so distraught and so upset and so unbelievably scared. The fear was overwhelming. And I remember being so frightened, not for myself, but because I had these 2 children that I didn't know how to feed. And the fear of that was just the most unbelievably heart-wrenching thing that I had ever felt. And it was a whole new ballgame being responsible for 2 children that I loved more than I loved myself, and yet not knowing how I was going to feed them. It was horrible. At the time, we were in marital counseling. Obviously, it wasn't going well since he left. But the counselor was an amazing woman. And when I came in that day telling her he left, and I was so scared, and I remember crying in her office, and she said, well, what can we do? Because I was telling her all the things I couldn't do. I can't feed them. I don't have any money. I can't go get a job because I don't have childcare. I can't do this. I can't do that. Everything was I can't. And she said, well, what can you do? And that changed my thought a little bit. And I said, well, I don't really have any options. I'm still trying to think through what are the possibilities. And she said, are you willing to clean houses? I said, sure, I'm willing to do anything. And right there, right then, she gave me a job. And she said, my housekeeper just quit. You can come and clean my house. I will talk to a couple friends of mine and see if they need house cleaners as well. But regardless, you can clean mine. She said, how much money do you need per month to get your kids out of school or get yourself out of school? And I told her at the time, I know it was like $1,100 a month, paid all the bills. Crazy to think about now when you think about how expensive everything is. But at that time, $1,100 a month did it. That gave me what I needed to pay for my whopping trailer payment of $182.11 per month, my lot rent, food, diapers, all the things. So she said, okay. She said, I will figure out how many of my friends need somebody to help clean house, but we'll help you. And at that point, I was 2 years away from getting my degree. So that again was another, what are you going to do about it? Because it quickly became me dragging my two children along with me. And my daughter was almost 4. My son was still not even walking, and he would be in his little walker. And we would go over to my counselor's house and I would clean her home twice a week. And then she ended up having a friend of hers who hired me as well. And I would go to her home twice a week. And they both paid me enough to be able to pay my bills. What are you going to do about it? It worked out. It worked out really well. So I did that for a little while. When I look back at these different instances of things that happened in my life, there was a theme. And that theme in these instances was understanding the difficulty and wanting to run away, wanting to hide, wanting to take the easy road, and yet recognizing that what I wanted was on the other side of the hard. It was on the other side of the hard road. And luckily, I took the hard road because it's what led to so many greater things in my life later. So I share these little anecdotes because I think at the end of the day, it's what many people are facing today. I don't know that there are any of us who want to have our health in the shitter. There aren't many of us who don't want good health because at the end of the day, it's really the only thing we have. If you don't have your health, you've got nothing else. So none of us can do any of the things that we want to do with our lives if we're not healthy. So the hard becomes the way to do it because the hard is what changes who we are. And it allows us to take our power back and to recognize that we are responsible for the boat we're in. And before you say, I'm not responsible for the fact that I'm a diabetic or I'm not responsible for the fact that I have hypertension, I would challenge you to think through that because a lot of those chronic diseases and disorders we are responsible for. It's our day-to-day activities and our day-to-day lifestyle that causes those chronic diseases. And yeah, there's part of that because the food system sucks and because we're being poisoned on the regular and there's crap in our water and crap in our food. But ultimately, we're responsible for what it is that we choose to eat. So I challenge you to think about, with regard to your health, what are you going to do about it? And do you want to work through the hard to get to where it is that you want to be? Because I hazard a guess for many of you, the answer to that will be yes. So that's the challenge between now and the next video, should you choose to watch another, is to think through what are you willing to do? And are you willing to go through the hard to get to where you want to be? In other words, what are you going to do about it? So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for joining me on this video and for just bearing with me as I share some of the old stories of my own life that got this phrase, what are you going to do about it, to be one that has been a common theme throughout my entire life. So I hope to see you again. There is no one coming to save us, but we do have everything we need to save ourselves. So I hope to see you again. Take care. Bye.